Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see Exit 8.
Yes.
I knew a little bit about this because this is based on a video game.
I also ended up knowing a little bit about it before we started.
Yeah.
Because you told me.
When we were deciding on things to watch, you said you were interested in this. I said, did you know anything about it? You said no, but it would be interesting because I told you it was based on this video game. And you said, well, that'd be interesting because you know the game and I don't know anything.
Yeah.
My expectation was that it wouldn't be very good. It's based on a very, very, very simple video game that might make a decent short film, I thought. Like, there's 10, 15 minutes in this, but you're going to have to expand this out pad this out in all sorts of sort of unsatisfying ways, I thought, to make it a feature. The feature is only 95 minutes long. It's on short. You're not going to get 3 hours out of this. I would say there is a bit of padding. I don't think it's a great film. It's sort of better than I thought it would be, and it's kind of interesting.
I really liked it.
Yeah?
And I thought it was ingenious.
I thought you were getting bored. That's what was my sense of it, but apparently not.
No, I wasn't getting bored. I mean, obviously, you try to figure out initially, because, and you'll describe this better than I, but the game has 7 stages, right? So as soon as it began to get to 4 or 5, you think, how long is left? And then, of course, you forget that you could revert right back to 0. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I could talk for a little bit about the kind of history of this kind of game.
Sure.
There's a lot that goes into it. So, the way that Exit 8, or The Exit 8, as it's kind of originally called, works, is it's in first person, you are stuck in a Japanese subway. Should point out as well, this is a Japanese film.
Yeah.
So, it's a Japanese-made game, it's a Japanese-made film, it's in Japanese, which I think gives the film a lot more credibility than it might otherwise have if it was just, Americans taking it and doing it. So, it's in first person, and you open your eyes in this very sterile, very blank Japanese subway corridor. There's the hum of the fluorescent lights. There's a big yellow poster on the wall that says 0, level 0, with an arrow. And you walk forward, you go around a couple of corners, and you go through this very long corridor that's got posters on the left, it's got some doors on the right, it has a man walking around the corner from the other end towards you and past you, a man in a business suit. He doesn't look at you, he doesn't do anything. This is faithfully recreated in the film. And then you walk through the other side, you walk through the corridor, get to the other side, and then it says 1. Poster's changed. And then you go through again. And then you go back and it says 0. So you're going through this loop, and sometimes you're getting a level ahead, sometimes you're not. And you see the instructions on the wall, again, faithfully recreated in the film, that say you're looking for anomalies. Okay? You need to take in the way that this corridor looks, and anything that's different, you turn back. If you see something different, you turn back, you go back towards the sign, and that's you done. You're on the next level. If you don't see anything weird, continue. And so it's just a game of spot the difference. It's that simple. This was released in 2023, the end of 2023, I think. I think it did very well with online streamers because it's something that it's a very simple game. It's very easy to interact with. There's no interaction. You're just walking. Your only choice to interact is forwards or backwards, and it's very easy for a chat, group of people watching the streamer to play along with. The streamer misses something. Did anyone in chat see it? That kind of stuff. They know what he's missing. All that. It's very entertaining to sort of backseat play this with someone. This game spawned a load of imitators. There's loads of games just like it. It also has its own sequel set on the subway train, rather than the platform. But this also has a history going back some 20 years almost. So there's what people are kind of familiar with. People who don't know video games, basically, I probably think of them as you kill people, and that's like your main interaction in a video game is how many people have you killed. That's basic interaction. And in 2008, this game is actually a mod of a game which is kind of like a homebrew project. It came out called Dear Esther, which was made by a guy called Dan Pinchbeck, who worked at, I think, the University of Portsmouth, and he had a kind of sort of indie studio called the Chinese Room. And this was set on like a Hebridean island, and you just walked around this island. It was kind of broody and mysterious. All you did was walk. There was no interaction. As you entered kind of certain areas, like you maybe walked through a cave or something, lines of dialogue would play, and it was like poetry or someone telling a story about a car crash. Really weird, kind of atmospheric. It wasn't very clear. It wasn't very explicit about itself. And the game finishes with you having kind of ascended this mountain and got to like a radio tower, and that's kind of it. And this was like, it was sort of controversial because this was a game with almost no interaction. Games are supposed to have loads of things to do. All you're doing in this is walking. And it was derogatorily called a walking simulator. That's all you do. You walk. You simulate walking. But this developed its own kind of mini genre. There was a game called Gone Home, where you're a girl who's been away from her family. She comes home. The house is empty. And through kind of exploring notes that are left out and diaries and things like that, you kind of work out what's been happening since you've been away. Kind of a family drama. There's a game called The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, does similar things. What Remains of Edith Finch, which is really good. This became a genre. Then there was a game called PT, which stands for Playable Teaser, in 2014, I think. And this was made as a collaboration between Hideo Kojima, who is a very, very well-known figure in video games. He created the Metal Gear series, which are hugely influential stealth action games. He's also done a few other kind of games, but he's a big star in video game design. And Guillermo del Toro, who he was working with. Guillermo del Toro actually appears in Death Stranding, which is another Kojima game from later, as a character. They were working together, and the idea was they were going to make, I think, a Silent Hill game. Silent Hill is a Japanese horror series. So you're thinking, these big names, Silent Hill's extremely big and popular, Kojima big and popular, Del Toro from the world of film coming into this. And what this game PT was a sort of horror looping corridor. You walk through a corridor, there was like a radio playing, I think a phone ringing, pictures on the wall with eyes scratched out, flickering lights, a door that was just slightly open with like something creepy inside it, and then you walk through this corridor to the end, and when you got to the end, it looped back, and you kept on looping around, and then things would change in various ways, and this was enormously exciting, and there was like a lot of mystery in it. So this was this development of this idea of the walking simulator as something that you could connote horror with. The idea of the loop in it was very important. That, again, enormously influential. It actually disappeared off the PlayStation Store and stuff after a while because they got rid of it, basically, because the whole project ultimately got cancelled. And I think you can still buy PlayStation 4s that have this game installed for a lot of money because you can no longer actually download it.
Right.
So the consoles that still have it on, expensive, on eBay and stuff. Anyway, that all kind of leads up to this kind of development of the kind of subgenre of just walking around and not interacting with very much at all, which is kind of the antithesis of what you imagine a video game should be. It changed video games into something that was much more about experience of a world, as opposed to what you could do to that world. The other thing that goes into it, which is not strictly video game based at all, is the liminal space aesthetic. This is something that's been, I think liminal spaces have been an idea for a couple of 100 years, but this is an aesthetic that really took off in the last 10 years or so, especially with something called the Backrooms, which is an online kind of, it's kind of a meme, it's a kind of collaborative, unofficial writing project. People do their own work in the backroom stuff. I showed you a little bit of this before, and we actually saw the trailer before this film of the Backrooms film. A film was being made of that idea, that kind of popular internet aesthetic. And the idea of it is empty spaces particularly devoid of any life, spaces that you're expecting to see something in but don't, and have a creepiness because of it. So, a hotel corridor that's empty, an office that's empty, nothing in it. Again, that hum of the fluorescent light is so kind of related to this. And these spaces are sometimes liminal in terms of space, like they're a space in which you're going from one space to another. Sometimes they're liminal in terms of time, like it's a space that was once used and is now no longer being used. It's on its way to being derelict. Connotes all this creepiness. That's certainly going on in Exit 8 as well. I think the idea, we start off with a very full subway station in the film, and all of a sudden the people disappear. He rounds a corner, people aren't there anymore. Now it's empty. The creepiness starts to come in. All of this to say, that is the setup for the film. Your main character has been through a busy subway, now finds himself in an almost unpopulated subway, and has to play this game himself. Has to find out, has to understand what anomalies are, how to detect them, and what is going on.
Yeah, okay, good. So that is the basic structure of the film. But I think, this is a film that's so ingenious, and that actually it has infinite possibilities. Because the way that the film is structured is it begins on a subway, and it kind of creates this problem of conscience, or this moral dilemma, right? And once that moral dilemma is established, then you go through this corridor, and part of what you confront in this corridor is ways of dealing with this kind of moral dilemma, or ways of being judged in relation to this moral dilemma. So one can imagine 35 different sequels in which the moral problem set up in the busy train is different each time, right? So the way of moving through the corridors, of reaching the levels, or the people one confronts in the subway become different. Here basically the central moral dilemma that's placed is so this guy's in the train, sees a woman with a child being screamed at by this man for just having a child, who's screaming. And then, as he doesn't want to get involved, and as he exits the train, he gets a call from his ex-girlfriend, that she's in the hospital, she's pregnant. Should she have the baby or not? What does he want?
Yeah, and it is she provides this. She delivers this as a binary choice: yes or no. What are you going to do? What should I? What to do? Basically,
that's right. So this walk through the levels and the corridors and so on is a way of coming to a conclusion around that, right? Whilst making us aware of people also being in the corridor for similar but different reasons.
Yes, that's an interesting kind of adaptation that has been made from the game to reality. So first of all, in the game, there is no story. You are just spotting the difference. And for another, you don't meet anyone. Apart from the male character who is from the game. He walks down the corridor all the time. Sometimes he's doing different things, which you have to spot. You basically don't meet anyone. There's no other character the way there is here. So the man who is represented in the film keeps on walking towards your main character and going out the other end of the corridor. In the second chapter of the film, as it's sort of provided to us, we realise that he is in his own purgatory in here, and he has succumbed to an anomaly. So, normally what happens if an anomaly comes up and you ignore it or don't see it, you're just reset to level 0. But one particular anomaly shows the exit. There's sunlight. There are steps upwards. He can leave. And he's overcome with ecstasy at this, and he goes up, and that essentially turns him into... He's sort of captured somehow, and he becomes a non-human zombie now in someone else's purgatory. But the point is, we've had someone else's experience here. There's also this young boy who was being helped by the man, now attaches himself to our main character, this sort of 20-something guy. And that's an interesting adaptation. Something that I think is... Because the film so directly adapts the central idea, if you don't see anything wrong, move forward. If you see something wrong, move back. And by something wrong, we're talking about something that has changed. That central idea sort of connotes, I think actually quite strongly connotes, fear of change.
Yes.
Progress is when there's no change. You must stop and go back when there is change. And what's happening in this guy's life is a change. He's just being told, you're going to be a dad. You have the decision about this. And so the fundamental metaphor, I think inadvertently becomes change is bad.
Well,
even though, because ultimately what we end up with right at the very end is, I will not stick with he gets out and he winds up back on that train with the woman, the screaming baby, and we see him move to confront the guy shouting at her, to defend her. So the ultimate lesson is, I will change. Yes. I will do something different. But that central idea of the way you going through the levels works completely contradicts that to me.
Well, that's interesting, but I think it's more than that. Yeah, so that's interesting. The idea that every time you see something different, I change. That you go back, but actually, the thing is that in going back, you also go forward.
Yeah.
You go on to the next level. So I think it's a bit more complicated than that. But the concomitant thing is also one of perception. Yeah, can you see? What do you see? Yeah, do you notice differences? Are you being attentive? Right, and I think those are also all tied, to the themes in the film. Yeah, is he being attentive to his girlfriend, to what she's going through? Yeah, kind of. There's all of these nuances, right?
Is he being attentive to the real world? I mean, as you say, we start off with a woman very unfairly being shouted at by a businessman on a train, and everyone there, including him, has their earphones in. He takes them out to look, puts them back in to ignore it.
Yeah. Well, what's most fascinating about that, and symbolic, is that initially he is not represented. You're seeing everything through his point of view.
It is literally a point of view shot, and a very long take that starts the film.
Yeah, you see him only as a reflection in the tube windows, right? So he's entirely in his consciousness and shut off from the world, and with his headphones. And that's not how it ends. I mean, he's still with his headphones, right? But now the camera's representing him, not just his point of view.
Looking directly at him from outside the train.
Yeah, he's in the world, right? Not just in his head, where the world is impinging, on him. He just wants to be inside his own head, divorced from the world, and the world impinges. By the end, he is in the world fully. Yeah, so I thought that was all kind of ingenious.
That is interesting. We might point out at this point the film is directed by Genki Kawamura. Never heard of him.
Yeah, me neither.
But I think he did a very good job here.
Yes. I mean, I think it's kind of, it's a really intriguing film, because also all of the dangers that are posited by the corridor are kind of birth, abortion, or disaster, or sex imagery. Yeah, like blood, these rats, but they're like rats that are as fetuses, right? Yeah, so
like human body part. It has that kind of imagery of that rat with the ear, very famous from some 25 years ago. But here it's amplified, and you have one with an ear, one with an eye, one with a mouth, and that becomes a screaming baby in this really fucked up way. Yeah,
and also the mother figure. I mean, in some ways it's not, because I think there are two women that we see. Well, three, but in the corridor we see two, right? One is his ex-girlfriend, now represented as the mother of this child. Yeah, very virginal, really. Yeah. And then there's the other woman, who we don't really know what ends up happening to her.
No, so this is so when we see the story of the guy walking through the corridor, except we see his story of walking through his own corridors and his challenge. He has someone walking through his corridors who's robotic, who is this kind of young girl. She seems to be dressed in like, not quite school stuff, but like young Japanese girl aesthetic, but then they interact.
Yes, they interact.
So that's the girl you're talking about.
And she kind of comes on to him, doesn't she?
Yeah.
There's something sexual, like maybe overly sexual about it. And
she turns out to be an anomaly.
Yeah.
I mean, that temptation's clearly part of what's happening to that.
And the bane of the robotic man is that his life is the same every day, that he goes to work, he goes on the subway, the repetition, the dullness, right? So the film has one central dilemma, but then there are these other social ones that are quite schematic, really. Yeah, but that kind of tie in some way to the central one. But I thought the central one was kind of really interestingly and complexly done, though maybe with a slight misogynist edge, or, certainly a too limited male point of view on it. Yeah,
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, it's all about the fear of being a father, right? Yeah.
It is, and like I say, it is interesting, I think, to think about it in terms of change is to be feared, because so many of those changes, those anomalies that you describe, are babies screaming, as you say, the sound of a baby, those kind of fetal rat things, and there's no point at which you break out of this by fighting it. You follow it. You obey the rules. You don't say, no, I will not fear change. That's why I think that's just a very muddled kind of metaphor beneath it all, because I think the film ultimately is saying, embrace change, go, break out of your monotonous cycles and so on. But in order to get out of his monotonous cycle, he has to follow the rules in it. I think it's kind of muddled. But I think you're right about how the film separates, how it shows characters who have different challenges that they have to face, different central dilemmas, central issues, but they're connoted both through this this repeating corridor. Because I think it's so easy to think of it fundamentally as this is an issue of, especially when you start with everyone on that train is basically wearing a suit. So you've got the mum and the baby, who are different, and you've got your main guy who's different because he's wearing sort of hoodie and young girl stuff, but he's still going through his job. It's a temp job. It is slightly different. Everyone else is a businessman in a suit, and that's like really deliberate, right? So this is about the grind constantly, one day after another, always doing the same thing. And then when you get to the businessman's story, and the girl talking to him, she says that she's talking, and then she repeats it robotically. That's what she's talking about. You have the one of the posters that is always on the wall is MC Escher's Mobius strip with the ants on it. So you have this idea of worker ants doing the same thing, going round and round the loop, all the way ending up back where they started and going round again.
You see how ingenious it is? I mean, I think it's interesting so earlier today, we saw Mark Jenkins' Rose of Nevada, right? Which has kind of all this really rich and poetic kind of visual imagery. But which feels like overly self-consciously poetic. And also, to me, a film that doesn't really know how to dramatize or doesn't really know how to narrate a story in an exciting fashion. This one weaves the most simple and basic promise, and kind of, keeps the viewer in mind, How do you not bore them repeating this, we saw this and that and that and now that, and yet kind of, your interest is always engaged, really. So to me, it's kind of like a difference between someone who knows how to tell a story and someone who's kind of muddling through an ocean of art, and thinks that whatever his personal expression is what's important. One has the artist's self-expression in mind, the other one has the audience in mind, and is very, very, very ingenious about using the possibilities of audiovisual storytelling to engage an audience, and to kind of to engage them, in complex ways. I mean, I would argue, that the film could be more complex, but some other director would have just made the corridor as a site of battles or, some other kind of spectacle, right? Like kind of, this has kind of more serious social issues at play. I
think the film has done a surprising amount with what is very thin source material. I don't think it's a really, really rich film. I think we are getting kind of more out of it than there may be in some respects. I mean, those ideas that we're discussing are definitely in there. But I think it is also, I don't think I'm wrong to think of it as having padded itself out a little bit as well.
It has padded itself out because I think the woman who is in the struggle of the boring man is unnecessary. I'm not sure what she adds, really. But I think the boy, the businessman, and the father-to-be, are very rich interacting together. Because also a fear of fatherhood is becoming that dull businessman who's trapped into, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in fact, that's an interesting thing, because I wondered what might be made of this, because when you see that young boy appear, he's some 5 or 6 years old, you start thinking, is he, or at least I started thinking, is he our main character when he was young? Is he his son from the future? Which is sort of kind of implied, certainly plays out as that at points. And you're also thinking then, is the older gentleman him in the future, if he doesn't change his ways or what have you?
Yeah.
You know, like these are kind of like 3 stages of man.
Well, I think all of those ideas are actually very self-consciously at play in the film.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, that older businessman is a fear of, you know, what he might become if he's trapped in a family, right? Yeah, if he's got to support a family in the future. Yeah, so, but also, there's the boring businessman and the young man interact in the sense that, you know, there are moral tests that the corridor places on them. The older businessman, when he sees the stairs, he leaves the child behind and runs towards the stairs, yeah? Kind of, you know, the younger man saves the boy. Yeah. Right? So,
And the older man is someone who absolutely is able to be tempted. Yeah. You know, he would have been tempted by the girl had she not suddenly snapped and gone robotic on him.
Exactly.
And you realise, oh, no, this is all going wrong. You know, who knows what might have happened.
Yes.
Sort of thing. But, and so, yeah, when he sees his way out and the kid knows that the kid doesn't speak, and, you know, he doesn't sort of indicate very much, but he's not going with him. He's staying there, and he doesn't, you know,
he doesn't
pay attention. That doesn't take a lesson from that. He ignores him and leaves him behind and pays the price for it.
Yeah, and the boy doesn't speak at that point. He'll speak later
when he becomes more comfortable with our main character.
Yeah. So, which also is interesting. At which point does the child speak? How many questions and what questions are necessary for the child to speak? Right? Because again, the older man has a kind of a more bullying, way of speaking to the child. Yeah.
Question that I kind of raised on the child is, you know, what did he do to end up there? I mean, because he is a child. You know, sort of the adults. You know, when you're an adult, you're able to have moral failings or moral dilemmas to face. As a child, you're really not, or you shouldn't be. You know, sort of punished by being put in subway purgatory for that. You kind of wonder, and ultimately, the child. He goes the right way one corridor, and we don't see him again. He has gone the right way, but we don't see him leave. We don't see what becomes of him. We don't know if ultimately he was like some part of the corridor that was placed in there to test our man. But
I mean, we are given a reason why he's in the corridor, though. Also, it is suggested that he is a figure in other people's moral dilemma. I mean, we're not like you know. So the reason why he says he's in the corridor is that he ran away from his mother, hoping that she would follow him, right?
Yes.
You know, but you know, he doesn't seem to be a subject in himself in the narrative, right? He is a subject in other people's stories, right?
Yeah, because that is interesting. It's a subtle thing, but it's true. Is that every time we see him go forward or backwards, you know, basically like when you round the corner is when you've like finalised that decision, and every time we see him do that, apart from the last one, he's done it with someone. No, that's not quite true. When the older man runs off thinking he can escape, we do see the young boy walk back on his own and go correctly backwards, and then meets our main character just then. And then right at the end, he goes, but we don't see what happens to him. But every other time, he's with someone, and they're the one really making that decision, or he's the one, he has informed them of an anomaly that they then go, oh yeah, we should go back. But they're making that decision together, they're making that move together. So it's not necessarily the case that he is, like I say, experiencing his own moral dilemma. It could be the case that he is, you know, a part of the game for other people. But the film doesn't go so far as to actually
I mean, the thing
elucidate any of that.
The exchange of the candy ice cream, is kind of like a key symbol, really. Yeah,
I don't remember that. What was that?
So when he offers the young man this, candy, he says, "Do you want this?" And it's like a candy, but that looks like an ice cream cone.
Is that when? That was a shell, wasn't it? That was the shell from the beach.
A shell. Okay.
Yeah, because that's what you see then when you see them as a family on the beach and that kind of dream slash hallucination.
And then that appears in the end as well.
Yeah. The shell for good luck.
I thought it was a candy, but yeah, a shell makes more sense actually, right? So yeah. So he does figure after he physically leaves the space through what that exchange symbolizes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had a really good time. I thought it was an ingenious film. I loved also seeing what a young, I imagine he's young, actually I shouldn't say that.
He's 40, he's the director.
Okay, well, that's a young filmmaker.
Yeah.
Can do with a sparse budget and limited means, because this is very economical filmmaking, really. It's just like, 90% of it takes place in this corridor.
I'm very curious, actually, to see... I'd love to see some behind-the-scenes stuff about how the corridor was done, because my expectation is that they built that corridor 2 or 3 times, so you could walk through it and then walk through it again as you went on, because the idea is that it repeats. It's a loop. There are definitely points at which you can tell that a shot has been blended into another one and they started again, but there's a lot of long take going on here. So we mentioned the first shot, which is not only long take, but it's also point of view. It's absolutely a nod to the game, which is first person itself. So we're in the character's shoes. It's not the first film to have done that. I mean, Doom from 2005 had a whole segment which was first person shooting a rubbish film, but that was kind of notable about it. So it's starting off that way, but it's also doing it in this very, very long take, basically from the subway up to getting into the corridor is all that first shot. That's all that first shot. And then, we get cuts here and there, but there's a lot more long take after that. We go through the corridor, we keep going again. And then, as I say, there are points where the camera kind of passes just close enough to a wall. You can tell they're blending that shot with another one to make it look longer than it is. But that feeling of constantly being there, of time passing as you're watching it, not you're not jumping ahead in time, this is real time stuff, is very rich. That sense of okay, well, forward again, or backwards this time, forward again, oh no, I'm back to zero, and that's, you spent all that real time with the characters. It's kind of quite important, I think. It depends on how you play the game, but it moves faster typically than the game does, because in the game you've got all the time in the world, usually, to spend looking up and down the corridor, and you will spend that time because you want to get it right. Here, the characters make those decisions a little quicker. Fair enough. And you also have those kind of in the game, when you're playing the game, you'll have those like frustrations. You'll end up going back a lot. You won't see anomalies as much as you do here. The film is more exciting than the game in the sense that anomalies are much more common, and they're always kind of meaning something, or typically kind of meaning something, or at least have kind of quite a fairly impending sense of threat to them, because you really don't know what's going on. In fairness, it's partly the case that you were probably more excited by a lot of the anomalies than I was, because most of them are taken directly from the game. So I know what I'm looking at. I know what I'm expecting. When the eyes on the posters are following, I've seen that one in the game. I know what I'm looking for. Whereas, you don't. It's probably more of a surprise to you for that reason, and probably has more of a sense of threat for that reason, because you're like, oh shit, the eyes are following. So for me, that comes across as a little less exciting, a little more banal, but that's just my experience. I've played the game. I mean, that is actually really fundamentally interesting to me, because I think I had some parts where this is a little bit boring. You clearly didn't, and I think fundamentally that has a lot to do with, not only, but it has a lot to do with the novelty that this has for you, which it lacks for me, because I'm familiar with the source material.
My reason for wanting to see it was how interesting that Cineworld is programming, what looks like a low-budget Japanese, maybe art horror film or something.
Yeah.
Right? That was my take on it. So I thought, if Cineworld is programming it, it must have something of interest in relation to all the other Hollywood products, basically. So,
it does.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that was my only reason for choosing it.
It's made some $40 million,
well,
which
really
is
good.
really big, by the way. And actually, so interesting that we, saw this with a pretty full audience. I mean, when we say full audience, we're always talking like up to half of the seats are filled.
Yeah.
You know, full is like Black Panther.
It was a 5 o'clock screening, and I would say, I don't know, there was probably like 80 people there, which is really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in one of Cineworld's smallest screens. I'd say it's more along the lines of maybe 30 people. But I mean, like I say, because it's a small screen. But for a film that size, you know, because when I was booking the tickets, you'd see all the seats that are taken. You're like, wow, that's a lot of seats that have been taken here. And you go, how many of these people are familiar with the source material? Yeah. Maybe a few, right? Okay, like people are gamers, people are internet savvy. They may have seen this. Some people will just be there because
it's a horror film.
Because it's a horror film, they've seen the trailer, it looks kind of interesting. But for whatever reason, this really got an audience that I did not expect to see. I did not expect to see that many people.
Yeah, and particularly at that time of day. I mean, so no, it kind of it's a film that's kind of, I think, without making too great acclaim for it, it's a film that's interesting in all kinds of ways and rewards viewing, really. And
I think one final thing is for me, the idea that a game like this has an adaptation is so interesting.
Well, not just that it has an adaptation, but that it has infinite potentials.
but what I mean is that you know, video game adaptations in cinema have a long history, and they've almost never been any good. But they've always been big games, right? So we saw Uncharted a couple of years ago. That is a massive property for Sony. You know, it's a huge that cost billions of dollars to make those video games. We had Alone in the Dark about 20 years ago, which was a very big horror game at the time. You had Mortal Kombat. There was another Mortal Kombat film coming out. We saw the trailer for it. There was Super Mario Brothers films, and we had those years ago. We now have a new series of them. But these are big games. These are big franchises that make a lot of money. The Exit 8 is a very small independent game. It's tiny. It costs almost nothing. It's made by kind of one guy, you know. And so when you see the trailer for it, you're going, well, they're not making a big budget film out of this. What are they making? And it has more of that kind of A24 small artsy horror movie thing. As I said, that's what the Backrooms is looking like as well. That's the idea of that. And I suppose what's interesting is that there is a space for that now. You wouldn't have seen that space 10 or 20 years ago. You know? So I mean, we've talked before about kind of the loss of the mid-budget film. This has a bit of that feeling come back to it. Like, this is not, although it is cheap
in terms of budget. Low budget.
Low budget. It has nonetheless a kind of, you could say, like a premium feel to it. It looks much bigger than its budget. Put it that way, you know.
I don't know what its budget is.
That's true.
You know,
but, what we imagine its budget might be based on kind of the number of actors in it, and the fact that it's a Japanese film. But you're right. We don't actually know.
And the number of sets and
But you know, it is very beautifully, professionally made. It looks
great. It moves great. It's ingeniously shot.
It has this high quality sheen about it, which you would not ordinarily associate, I think, with. I know, it's just something that, like I say, that kind of A24 space. A24 has become kind of a byword unto itself for this kind of mid-budget horror that has a premium sense about it. That's what this is. It's very surprising to me.
I was listening to a Pedro Almodovar interview where he was with his brother, who's his producer, and talking about how he always does what he wants. He always makes what he wants, but he's always pragmatic, right? So he says his films never cost much. And, you know, why don't his films cost much? Well, because they're generally about people, and generally about people in living rooms or bedrooms or, kind of, there's not an expensive special effects sequence or a battle scene or ships or, and I thought, by that criteria, this is even like less expensive because it doesn't take place even in rooms. It takes place in a corridor, right? I mean, it obviously does have, you know, spectacular moments of flood, you know, the rat sequence and so on. So I'm sure those things were more expensive, but it's kind of, you know, ingenious use of these spaces, really.
I have a figure here from themoviedatabase.com. I don't know where they got this figure from, but the budget is quoted as $1.4 million.
There you go.
Tiny.
I mean,
That's nothing.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it certainly looks much better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks amazing. In fact, this is something that we said about the last Japanese import film that we saw, which was Godzilla Minus One, which was made on a shoestring compared to your American Godzilla movies, and look comparable, look better at times. Yeah. And you're going like, where the hell is this money going in American cinema? Exactly. It's not just on the actors, although it is a bit, but it's being wasted somewhere.
Yeah. All right. On that note, I really recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised that I recommend it.
Yeah,
but it's a decent movie.
Yeah. So thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and Instagram, Eavesdropping at the Movies. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.